from it, but a man is different. Humans have a really odd ability to avoid things and to convince themselves of untruth. Now, bad faith, according to Sartre, his primary example of bad faith is the story of a woman. Two lovers are fighting over her. What does she do? She goes limp and lets them fight. That is one of the chief errors of existentialism, is choosing not to choose, right? That's self-deception, because you're still making a choice, but the choice in this case is just being abdicated. Now, bad faith in Bittersweet Candy Bowl is extremely interesting, because you can look at this comic and you can identify and say, who is deceiving themselves here and why? And just think about that after you've read this comic for a little bit. A discussion of bad faith with Lucy would just, you could probably have that conversation for hours. And the comic is, of course, still ongoing, so a lot of this is still unresolved. But the thing about Lucy is she deceives herself so well. She is in denial for so long, right? So what is the purpose of that denial? What is the purpose of that deceit? Why would a person do that to themselves? And the funny thing is that, you know, this is why I like the comic so much. It's realistic. People do that to themselves. People do try to convince themselves that they don't have feelings for someone. People do try to convince themselves they're a good person. They're not in the wrong. Even though logically, somewhere in their minds, they know they're in the wrong. And the funny thing is that when you really look at this in terms of relationships, that's probably one of the best places to find examples of bad faith, of self-deception. There are so many different examples, but I want to move on real quick to talk about the other term that I would like to apply to Bittersweet Candy Bowl. The other one, and this is probably one of my favorite philosophical terms, is the one that got me addicted to philosophy, is anguish. Anguish, also known as dread. Now, anguish is when you recognize your power to hurt others, or your responsibility that you have in the creation of yourself, that your choices have a real impact, and ultimately you are the only person who is accountable for your actions. You will spend a great deal of your life in dread, running away from that responsibility, running away from that truth. Now, the reason I think this is so interesting with Bittersweet Candy Bowl is that dread, anguish, these things really start to become a problem during adolescence. When you make that transition to high school, when you reach puberty, that's the point that you reach that really odd threshold of adulthood that you are now a person who should be responsible for their actions. You are a person who can have significant impacts on other people. And the real terror of it, the real fear of it, is that there's a chaos that comes into your decisions. You have to make decisions, you have to make choices without actually really even understanding what the impact is going to be. So there's this really horrific random element to it, right? That you have to make these decisions. You have to commit yourself to things, not knowing whether or not they will work out in the end, not knowing how it will all work out. Now, again, all of these characters are involved in various love triangles, right? And they all end up hurting each other. They all end up trying to deceive themselves. They all end up trying to stay away from the thing they really want the most, or the fear of the committed relationship, the fear of the other. I think it's absolutely fantastic that you can really dig a lot of these concepts out. And to put it against the backdrop of adolescence, it makes for a fantastic piece of philosophy that isn't actually philosophy. And the funny thing is it seems to be something that just kind of pops up in pop culture every once in a while. And I've actually asked the author, and she said, I don't really know that much about existentialism. It's all kind of foreign to me. So, you know, she was channeling something here that's probably a lot more universal, but this is just a really good example of how to go and find those technical definitions in philosophy. And I've been reading Walter Kaufman's Existentialism from Dostoevsky to Sartre, and I actually just got finished reading Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky, and I wanted to read a very, very short passage from this. And I invite you again, think about Lucy from the comic. Think about her behavior and her self-deception. Of course, Dostoevsky predates existentialism, but according to Kaufman, Dostoevsky laid the foundation for a lot of what existentialism would become, and a lot of the terms that they would later use. So just listen to this. May it not be that man loves chaos and destruction. There could be no disputing that he does sometimes love it, because he is instinctively afraid of attaining his object and completing the edifice of his constructing. Who knows? Perhaps he only loves that edifice from a distance, and is by no means in love with it at close quarters. Perhaps he only loves building it, and does not want to live in it, but will leave it when completed. Just think about that in regards to Lucy, to Mike, and especially Paulo. When you think about Paulo's behavior, when he's rejected by his first girlfriend, Tess, what does he do? He goes out and he gets involved with all these other people, and he just makes life absolutely miserable for everyone around him, right? And yet, in today's comic, Paulo is sitting there after all of these decisions that he's made, after all this damage he's done to this person, and he still wants her. That is the only thing that he wants. And yet, every single choice, every single decision he's made has been in an effort to push her away. A denial of that truth, that bad faith, that self-deception that he just can't get over. Again, coming back to Lucy, everything she's done has been, up until very recently in the comic, an effort to push away the thing that she wants the most. It's better in this instance to build up the thing that you want and then run away from it because you don't want to attain it. Very, very existential. And the crazy thing is that if I had a class on this, I'm sure there would be students in the classroom being like, I don't see that at all. Or, what about this character? Or, what would happen if this alternate thing? And what if this other choice had been made? It's great. And it would be a tool for the teaching of existentialism that would go even further than just reading the actual existentialist texts themselves. I'm very thankful that in our current information paradigm, that we have the opportunity to have access to texts that take risks, that try things that, wouldn't necessarily appear in the ordinary comic world, that you can actually see the growth of an artist over time. You can see risks that are taken, and you can see, very, very complicated social and, in my opinion, philosophical ideas explored in the mundane setting that is benefiting to them without the constraints of that mainstream market driving the form. It's just an absolutely wonderful age we live in, that we can actually have these texts to analyze, and that there's people out there like me who can see these amazing, very subtle movements, these very subtle components of these texts, and dig them out. It's just exciting. It's great to be alive. Yay!